Hey PC World, Gordon here with PC World, and I'm joined with Dan, and we are going to check out the ultimate gaming laptop battle. I know you're saying these look just like a couple 17-inch laptops, but check this out. These are both Acer Predator, sorry, gonna try that again, Acer Predator Helios 500 laptops. Both of them 17 inches, both of them almost exactly the same weight, 8.5 pounds, 11.8 with the power bricks, but inside, very different. On the right, if I got this right, I can't even tell. I can't even tell, they look so similar, I can't even tell. On the right is the highly anticipated AMD Ryzen 7 2700 laptop. That's right, 8-core desktop Ryzen part in this laptop.
Okay.
And a Radeon Vega 56. Yes, all AMD, all Team Red. None of that blue and green stuff.
Yeah,
that's over here. This, of course, is a Helios 500 with a Core i9 8950 HK CPU. That's 6 cores, mobile part, hyper-threading, and a GeForce GTX 1070 inside. Both of them have 1080p screens, both of them 144 hertz. One has FreeSync, one has G-Sync, but look how damn close these things are. I'm gonna turn this over. Dan's gonna do the same to his. I'm gonna take the bottom
so yeah,
off
the screws
of this Acer Helios 500. I'm not gonna try to say Predator Helios 500, it keeps messing up. Yeah, pull it out. Check this out. They look exactly the same. What is a little different is you can see a bigger heatsink on the Ryzen 2700. Both of them have 2 open SODIMMs. They both have 16 gigs, so you can definitely get 32 gigs of RAM in here. Same size battery. The hard drive is actually underneath here. On this model, you only get a hard drive on the Intel model. Oddly, no hard drive on the AMD model. The real bummer is there's no actual cable to add your own, I don't believe. Like you could pull the battery up.
Okay, is this one also undone? Yep.
Yeah, same thing. I can't reach in here to see. Sometimes they will leave the cables to hook up the hard drive if you do it optionally. I don't think it has it in here. These both have, I think, 75-watt batteries, 2 M.2 slots, but check this out. This is the bottom. You just saw me pull this off of the AMD laptop. We're gonna put that back in?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna take the bottom from the Acer Predator with AMD, put it on here. If I sent this back to Acer, they would be really confused right now. When I send it back, I gotta make sure I switch these because this is the bottom from the Intel and the bottom of the AMD, or I can't even tell. But they are basically exactly the same laptop. Only difference is CPU and GPU. So that, of course, gets us to our battle here, which is what I'm excited because you wanna see how would Ryzen and Vega do against Core i9 and GeForce. And we're gonna kick that off. Let's first talk about the CPU because there's a lot of excitement about Ryzen and laptops. This is a desktop part, yes. But first, let's kick off with performance.
Yeah.
We'll give you something pretty to look at. We'll open the tops up so you can.
Did you think that there was gonna be a major difference between these two? What was your initial thought?
My initial thought was I thought 8 cores,
yeah,
gonna be better. I know Vega 56 on desktop actually does really good against 1070 on desktop, so I kind of want to see how that translated. Keep in mind, this is not a 2700X, which has a higher clock. This is a 2700. I believe it's, let me see what the base clock is. Base clock is 3.2 with a 4.1 turbo, and for the i9, basically 2.9 base. We know it doesn't run there, and basically like 4.1 turbo. Again, but first, benchmark result. This is Corona 1.3. It is basically a CPU benchmark. It's rendering, and we can see the advantage of 8 cores. You know, I really thought, 8 cores in a laptop is going to have nice headroom in those heavily multi-threaded tasks. Corona is a renderer. I think it's used in 3D Studio, Autodesk, bunch of Autodesk products. You can see a huge boost over the Intel box with a Core i9. 8 cores, there's going to be times where it's just faster. 3.3 million versus 2.4 million. So
that's a good difference.
Good, very good amount of difference. And let me just point out, I actually tested the Intel Core i9 two ways. Out of the box from the factory, Acer provides an overclocking utility. It's built into their Acer Predator utilities. Lets you overclock it. There's two presets. There's a faster on CPU, there's a faster on GPU, and then there's a turbo on CPU and turbo on GPU. Just to make this easier, I just went from stock clock, which is what you're going to get when you turn it on, to turbo. One thing is that turbo, be advised, it doesn't stick. So if you set it to turbo, you do your gaming, you shut it down, you come back in the morning, turn it back on, it will be out of turbo. Every time you reboot, it shuts it off. But we just want to see what you're going to get, because that is a valid option. For AMD, I did try to overclock it. I had zero success. I don't know if it's just because we're very early with the Ryzen Master for this laptop, but I could not get any extra clocks out of this Ryzen part. But still, doesn't matter. 8 cores, better than 6 cores, and look at that. Red bar, longer than blue bar.
So even when you overclock, it's still much faster.
Still definitely in Corona, because this is heavily multi-threaded.
Yeah.
We're talking like maybe 20% faster. Very, very decent, overstock clock. So next one. Also, V-Ray 1.08. This is another 3D renderer, ray shader. I don't know what exactly it is. I can't remember, but look at that. 8 cores, smoking those 6 cores. Just, 16 threads versus 12 threads. Big, huge advantage for Ryzen 2700 in this laptop. So that is better. Shorter bars, of course, being better. Shorter bar in this case is red. Team red, go. Blender test. This is an open source, free 3D modeling, 3D rendering tool. Very, very popular in the indie movie scene. Closes up here, interestingly, I was kind of surprised. We still get maybe 8% over the Intel Core i9 at stock clocks, but against the overclock, it's pretty much a wash. And you would sort of think that the extra cores, extra threads would make a difference here. I don't know if necessarily if it's Blender or just simply the higher clocks that the Intel part is running at.
Make up for it.
Not really sure. I didn't have time to look into that. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You just want your project to be done. And overall, still a good message, though. If you need the cores for your gaming laptop, or let's face it, not everybody buys these laptops only to play games. A lot of 3D renderers or 3D modelers might buy gaming laptops because they want a big, powerful GPU and big, powerful CPU. So I think it's very valid. I think we do look at other tasks other than just pure gaming. So. Cinebench, of course, everybody is very familiar with. Maxon's uses Maxon's Cinema, same engine from Maxon Cinema 4D. This is the multi-threaded portion again, and we are seeing again very decent uptick over that Core i9. Although the Core i9, it seems to be making up for it with the higher clocks that it has. 1500 versus 1400. A little close for comfort. 2700 or 2700 non-X is not quite pushing the same clocks you get out of it in a desktop. Still, red bar better, red bar longer. I'm declaring win in Cinebench. So for the most part, we are seeing everywhere from 10 to 25 to 30% difference in a lot of the multi-threaded tasks. It's going to vary depending on what you're using, what tasks you're using. These are heavily multi-threaded tasks. 3D renders are often best for that category.
But this one says that the turbo one is actually slower?
Yeah, so that's just simply probably run-to-run variance. You got to remember that the turbo Cinebench only takes 3 minutes to run. So if you are taking a stock clock Core i9, any Coffee Lake laptop processor, and you're running Cinebench, it's actually, a lot of times, if the laptop vendor sort of programs it that way, it's going to run at a very high...
It's already hitting kind of that turbo end naturally.
It'll already hit that, I think I was seeing 4.4, 4.2 on the Core i9. You will see that on stock speeds as well for maybe up to a minute or two before it sort of burns off all of it and pushes it down. If you are running turbo mode, it should be running faster all the time. It should be running up above 4 gigahertz most of the time. Whereas if it's on stock, it'll probably drop under that once it sort of heats up. And that's the reason you're seeing similar performance there. There were times where the turbo it just didn't matter. So moving on from Cinebench, we're going to do some compression tests. A lot of those are 3D modeling. These are benchmarks built into very popular compression tests. The first one's WinRAR 5.40, multi-threaded test. Unfortunately for Ryzen, longer bar is better here, and both the Intel 6 cores, even though it has 6 cores, it is a multi-threaded test. The 6-core Core i9 is whooping that 8-core Ryzen 7 2700, and we've seen this in the past. WinRAR just doesn't like the microarchitecture of Ryzen. Some of it could be the Infinity Fabric. I've seen this also with sort of mesh CPUs on Intel side, where Skylake X does worse than Broadwell E. It definitely loves, these ring bus type designs of the small socket. Core i9, Core i7, Coffee Lake, all those are ring bus design. It really loves those, does great. In the end, if you're using WinRAR,
but that's one reason why you don't like WinRAR.
Well, that's why you don't. I see a lot of people, AMD fans, are going to go, "Well, run 7-zip," and of course we do that. The next slide is 7-zip. We're running 7-zip 1805, multi-threaded performance. Again, longer bar is better. Red bar slightly longer. You got to say that's a little uncomfortable, but because you are looking at 8 cores versus a 6-core, and also 7-zip multi-threaded performance does scale really well. So I got to say that's pretty close. Still a win. Technically, it's a win, but a lot of people would say it's a tie against that turbo Core i9.
Yeah.
Stock clock, though, clearly ahead by good 8%, 8 to 10%. I mean, it's not a bad message. A lot of that, I think, is just simply the clock speeds here. This should be our last multi-threaded test, which is Handbrake. We use a slightly older version here because we have a very large database, but this is Handbrake 09.9. We take a 30 gig 1080p file. We encode it with the Android tablet preset in an MP4 format. You can see 8 cores versus 6 cores. Should be shorter. Shorter is better. It means less time waiting. You will spend less time waiting with Ryzen 7 over Core i9 to a decent tune. We're looking at what, maybe 15% faster. I mean, good. It's a good win. Solid win there.
For those of you still ripping those DVDs from Netflix,
we're still ripping DVDs from Netflix. Yes, but I got to say, the entire world is not about multi-threading, and I think we should move on to our single-threaded performance section. This is where we run a bunch of applications. We look at the single-threaded performance.
Which is probably more apps than not, right?
Yeah, so most of Photoshop, unfortunately, 80% of the time is single-threaded, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Chrome, a lot of things you do in Office. Excel is multi-threaded, but only for serious financial analysis. Nerds, for most people, it's a single-threaded task. Single-threaded performance is probably more important for a lot of people that aren't doing 3D rendering, they're not doing coding. And here, Ryzen 7 2700 is going to be at a deficit against, especially Core i9. Core i9 was made for very high clocks, and we're seeing it here. Cinebench 193 versus 163, that's stock clock, so that's a whooping for single core. Not a surprise. Anybody who's followed the sort of performance of these CPUs knows, Intel's very hard to beat, and those low end kind of turbo scores, it's just running at up above 4 gigahertz. And again, when you do turbo, there's no difference between turbo and non-turbo because the chip turbo's up to 4.1 anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Even on stock, it's going to boost up to 4.1. When you do the turbo, doesn't make that much of a difference.
In a hypothetical world where you were able to kind of overclock the Ryzen, do you have a sense of what speeds you would, like what, on the 2700 desktop, what are people kind of seeing? Well,
so 2700 desktop, I believe the turbo speed is 4.1. For the most part, I saw all the time using Ryzen Master, it was 3.5, no matter what. No matter what load it was, the Ryzen 7 in the Predator, the current model, current BIOS that I have, current Ryzen Master, was 3.5 flat out, all cores, all the time. Never went up, never really seemed to go down. So, and again, I tried doing a single core overclock to 4, then to 3.7, then to, I just never really, I would say, overclock, push the overclock button on the profile, it would go to black screen and never come back. After I rebooted, I could come back. I think clearly it's not quite there yet. And I should talk about acoustics between these two.
Same audio,
I really expected Vega 56 with Ryzen 7 desktop part to just scream all the time.
Okay.
to be loud as hell. And I gotta say, for the most part, it wasn't. It was actually very quiet. In fact, it's probably one of the quietest 17-inch gaming laptops I've seen.
These are pretty thick.
They're very thick. They have very, very beefy cooling systems. The Core i9 with that GeForce 1070, you would hit it up and it would just, the fans just start making noise. It was a very, not horrible laptop, but pretty much like most 17-inch gaming laptops that are tuned to go all out. This one, fans never got loud. And I was actually really surprised at that. And as we saw when we showed you the back of it, you could see the heatsink. It's just got a a bigger cold plate. I don't know if that's what it is, or if it's simply there's more tuning that has to be done on the AMD platform. I'm inclined to think it's a combination of a larger cold plate, plus also they got to do a little more tuning. Just to make sure, I was like, well, if I crank the fans on this to manual, max speed.
How loud does it get?
They both got really loud, and interestingly, I did not see the Ryzen up clock. It was just 3.5. It's like you would think if you're running 100% fans, the CPU would go, I've got a little more ceiling here. I can go to 3.7, maybe 3.8, but it never did. It just was a flat 3.5. So it sort of implies to me there's more tuning to be done. So newer software, newer BIOS could actually make this
a little more potential.
A lot more potential. But again, single-threaded performance, I don't think it's going to touch Core i9 necessarily. This next slide is 7-zip 1805. Same thing you saw earlier, but single-threaded performance. Get used to this pattern here.
Yeah.
Longer is better. That red bar is shorter. Looks like about a 15, maybe 20% difference, maybe 15%. You're going to see that in a lot of places. And
this is kind of, I feel like, to be expected. This is all semi-predictable, right?
Yeah, this is very much a reflection of what we've seen on the desktop battle.
Yeah.
Single-threaded, Intel generally has won that. Same thing in laptops. Although laptop is different because there's very finite cooling, very finite power oftentimes. But let's get into gaming.
Yeah.
Let's get a little gaming a little bit.
If you're buying this, you are primarily probably buying it to game.
Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor 4K textures, 1080p Ultra preset. Remember, I know you can say, 1440p 4K. These laptops are 1080p, so we are looking at 1080p performance on these laptops. This is not a desktop. You can't run it at higher resolutions on the screens that you bought with them. Middle Earth, we see Predator, the Ryzen 7, the Vega 56, slight deficit, maybe 8 to 10%. Over the Core i9 with the GeForce GTX 1070. But you get used to it, folks. We've seen this before on desktop, especially at lower resolutions. The Ryzen just doesn't have the clock speeds. Some games just don't like its microarchitecture. It's just always sort of been at that hole. And we see that here. So get used to it.
To be expected.
To be expected. Like next slide, Rise of the Tomb Raider, 1080p, very high. DX11, because that's how we run this benchmark. On other laptops, there will be DX12 benchmarks. This particular one, we are running in DX11 mode. And we sort of see that familiar Ryzen deficit, if you want to call it. It's definitely at lower resolutions where you are not GPU bottlenecked. It doesn't have the clock speeds. It may have something to do with the architecture, but it's always going to be slightly slower. Sometimes decently slower than the Intel part against a Core i9 with high clocks versus a Ryzen 7 85.
This is a good jump.
This is a decent bump for Intel and GeForce here, where they are, maybe 15, 20% faster.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change too many things. This is the much older Tomb Raider, 1080p ultimate quality. Frame rates go up on this older game, but you are still seeing a very similar gap between the stock Intel Core i9 and the GeForce GTX 1070 and that Ryzen 7 Vega 56. Of course, if you overclock the GeForce and Core i9, you get even more out of it. But yeah, still very similar. We've seen this before. Rainbow Six Siege, older game, but super popular. Also, you clearly don't need a lot of GPU to run this. We close things up a little bit.
Or
Vega
CPU
56,
to run this, really.
Or CPU. I think that might be why we're definitely closer. I would say this is mostly a tie. Core i9 1070 still has a slight lead, especially if you overclock it, but 187 frames a second versus 193 in Rainbow Six Siege at 1080p Ultra. I'm not going to complain about this. You'll definitely get very beautiful 144 hertz frame rates out of these laptops here, so that's a good sign if you're a Rainbow Six Siege player. But we do want to run some games that are favorable to AMD. I don't want to do that to be unfair, but I just want to run something. I do know early on, after the whole kerfuffle over the original Ryzen launch, AMD looked at a bunch of games and said, hey, this game runs on us. It doesn't really seem to penalize us. Doesn't seem to.
There are some games.
Dsx Mankind Divided, 1080p, DX12 mode, ultra quality. Team Red up it a little bit, 66 frames a second versus 60 on the stock Intel overclock. You get a little closer with the Intel GeForce team, but definitely Team Red is ahead here. You would call it mostly a wash, but it's not bad. We're not seeing this kind of like deficit that AMD has been at in the past. Next is Shadows of the Tomb Raider. I like this. This is a brand new game. It seems to really like clock speed. It really seems to like core count, thread count. More cores, generally 8-core CPU is going to outperform a 6-core, which is, we have not seen that in reality in too many real games that people are going to play. Shadows of the Tomb Raider, 66 frames a second versus 59.
Yeah. So how much of this is, it's a newer game, maybe taking, more, either being programmed a little bit more for AMD or understanding that AMD exists in this space, or is it the cores, or is it that it's DX12? What?
Oh, I think it's a little bit of everything. Again, This game loves core count. 8-core Intel outperforms 6-core Intel, and higher clocked Intel outperforms lower clocked Intel. And Ryzen, clearly this game was developed. The developer hey, we know Ryzen exists now. We're going to make sure it runs good on this platform, and it's running really well. I mean, this is a combination of Vega 56 probably, it running fine on Ryzen, and also decent cores. So I think it's a good sign that the path forward for AMD products is better. I mean, you've seen a lot of these where they're always maybe 15% slower.
All these old games, it was significantly slower.
Right.
But some of these newer games.
Yeah, newer games, DX12 mode, it closes up the gap. So good show here for AMD. Again, I think both of these are great products. But keep in mind, a lot of these laptops, or a lot of these tests, they factor the CPU. And the CPU does make a lot of a game, in the physics and all the AI. There's all kinds of things that can affect performance. I did want to see how just the Vega 56 does against that GTX 1070. We know on the desktop, Nvidia specifically came out with the GTX 1070 Ti just because Vega 56 was faster. So I want to see if Vega 56 is faster than 1070. I ran 3D Mark TimeSpy 1.1. Only the graphics performance is looked at, so the CPU doesn't really matter in this test very much at all, probably 1% difference at all, if that. And you are seeing a decent uptick for Vega 56. Radeon Vega 56 is 2790 versus 2593 of that GeForce GTX 1070. That was kind of what, again, caused Nvidia to come out with the emergency 1070 Ti part. Although in this case, overclocking the 1070 seems to make up for it. We're up at 2815. Pretty much a wash with the Vega 56 and the 1070 once you overclock it. So,
do you think most people would overclock it?
You could, but again, the Predator, interestingly, when you overclock, you click the overclocking mode. You can do it independently of the CPU or the GPU. Once you reboot, it goes away. It doesn't stick. You got to go in and change it. Probably because they figure if you hit a bad overclock.
So you think it might just be more like, oh, I'm about to play this intensive game, let me kick it up. But if I'm just playing an older one, I just leave it as it is.
Yeah,
90%.
I think so. I think people are going to forget to overclock, although you can. That does help. At the same time, I think it's not going to make any difference. Both these laptops most of the time we're pushing in excess of 150 frames to 180 frames a second. Definitely newer games, slowing them down a little bit. So, but definitely Vega 56 looking pretty good in this laptop.
Okay.
Before we get out of here, I do want to get into one test that I love to run. This is basically Cinebench, where I run from 1 thread to 16 threads. It is a 3D renderer. The workload is still the same. It is not what most of us would do, but it sort of gives me a feel for what happens if you put a load of 3 threads or 4 threads or 5 threads. So if you have a specific Photoshop filter that is only going to use 8 threads or 4 threads, you would sort of get a feel for how fast it's going to perform. And as we look at that, you can see the advantage Intel has. Blue is Intel Core i9 stock speeds. Green is AMD. And you can see in all those light threads, it's just at that penalty. It's just, it can't run the same clocks that Core i9 can hit. It does pick up a gain at the top end when you basically
run out of cores.
You run out of cores, right? Because there's 8 cores, more than 6 cores, 16 threads, more than 12 threads. And AMD has an advantage there, but let's look at it as a percentage. You can see a lot of this negative, a lot of that big negative delta there. It's just because the Intel part is just running at just really high clocks, especially you get the 3 threads. It's probably running at 4 gigahertz all the time. I mean, it really does run 4 gigahertz and up all day, whereas the Ryzen is a 3.5 part. You get a little bit here on the far end, decent performance, 16 threads, 15 threads, but not great. And here's the other thing, this is stock speed. I'm gonna click it over to turbo. Blue bars get longer, you get closer to those green bars. Let's look at it as a percentage. We're looking at 20% in like that, 6 thread, 4 thread, 5 thread. It's got a big advantage.
It doesn't switch off until about 13 or 14 threads, so it's basically giving a 2-thread handicap almost.
Yeah, almost. But and on turbo, Core i9 does really well. I gotta say, I'm surprised. 2700 is only 10% faster than Core i9, even though it's got 16 threads. It's pretty close.
If you had been able to get the AMD one overclocked, where do you think it would kind of shift this line a little bit?
Well, I think if
you had to guess,
if I had to guess, I got to say I think Acer can do some more tuning. I think we can pick up more low clocks. Again, I ran this, it was basically locked at 3.5, it seems like. I couldn't overclock it, but if you can get it up to 3.7, 3.8, it's
so these like 20%
at that left end of this chart, it's gonna close it up. It's gonna close up the gap in doing those, Photoshop, Chrome, those kind of things.
Do you think it would be 10% versus 20%?
Maybe. I mean, if they can get the clocks high enough, possibly. Of course, we are looking at the turbo when it's overclocked, but
it's hypothetical too.
It'll get closer. I don't think they're gonna outperform Core i9. Coffee Lake S it's been a screaming CPU. It's basically all cores, 4 gigahertz most of the time, and a lot of them were just running at just very high clocks, 4.3, 4.4, and those lighter threads. It's going to be tough for a Ryzen 7. This is not a 2700X. This is a 2700. It's just got lower clocks overall, and it's going to be a little tough.
Okay.
We should also talk about this. I know people don't care about wall power.
I don't care about wall power.
You don't care about wall power on a gaming laptop, but you need to know this. I took the laptops, both of them. I ran Prime 95. I used a version that did not use AVX, which would use even more power. So non-AVX version. Remember, it's powering everything. Screen brightness was the same. The Ryzen 7 system, 128 watts at the wall, measured with the watt meter. Core i9 stock speed. CPU load only, 116 watts. Not a big difference. I wouldn't go like, hey, give me a special green badge for my computer now.
I mean, you swap out one light bulb for an LED, you've made it up.
Yeah, it's less than that difference probably. When you overclock the Intel system, the Core i9, though, I do want to point out we're looking at about 131 watts. So it uses more power when you're overclocked. I also then went ahead and ran Furmark, which is a pure GPU stress test. Not much CPU is factored in here, so we are looking at how much power it sucks at the wall on a GPU load. Radeon Vega 56, 208 watts. Clearly you use more with the GPU. GTX 1070, 175. When you're overclocked, it's pretty much still the same, interestingly. 175, 177 versus 208. Again, not a lot to get super torqued up about. The 1070 is a legitimate mobile laptop GPU, and from what I can tell, this Radeon Vega 56 is the desktop version, probably lower clocks because of the power consumption levels.
And that's not even a max Q, this is just straight up.
Not a max Q, it's what they like to call a max P, but just full performance 1070. Definitely it's going to use less power than the Radeon 56, but not a huge amount. You're not going to get a Citizen of the Month award. And also, let's also point out battery life. I know people don't care about this, but you do want to know. We use a 4K video. We run it down until the battery goes to 0. 260 nits on both screens. We use earbuds in both laptops. And also, as you can see, we actually covered up the cameras to prevent any cheating. Sometimes they will actually lower the video, the brightness based on lighting conditions in the room. First, Intel Core i7, 125 minutes.
2 hours, one movie.
Yeah, maybe one movie. Not great. If you can actually open that on a plane, I'd be surprised though.
I don't think the table would support this laptop.
No, I don't. I'd be interesting to plug that into the plane's outlet too. It's a 330 watt power supply. I don't know how they'd like that. And for the desktop Ryzen 7 2700 with what I think is a desktop Radeon Vega 56, it's 72 minutes.
So 1 hour.
Maybe 1 hour if you're lucky.
Yeah, one episode, Game of Thrones.
Yeah. It's not. These are both have the exact same 74 watt hour battery, by the way.
Same screen.
You could probably swap the batteries out if you wanted to. Same screen, everything is the same. So basically, this is atrocious battery life. This is really atrocious battery life. Doesn't matter. These are gaming laptops. It's never going to get good on a gaming laptop that has discrete graphics that's on all the time. So it is what it is. Running on AC power. It's enough power so you can go from one room to the next room. So that's just something you need to know. I don't think you should factor that in. I would factor in like really what's right for you. Core i9 with is definitely going to be a better gaming laptop overall. Slight advantage, not huge. Definitely 10 to 15, maybe 20% more performance. It feels like over Ryzen 7. But not generally enough to get that torqued out about. I do think it's just better if you are 75% gamer, 25% whatever other stuff. If, however, you do 3D rendering.
If you live in that 15, 16 core world.
You live in that, you really need something for doing.
Is there a price performance difference? That's, I think, maybe an argument someone might be able to make.
Yeah, so that's the issue. I think not necessarily even the parts, because honestly, I think both laptops are great. They are going to give you fantastic gaming experience between both of these. The storage configuration is just wacky. 2500 for the Intel Core i9 with a 512 gig SSD, 2 terabyte hard drive.
Which feels about right for what you would want in a gaming laptop.
You need storage. Game installs are 50, 60 gigs these days. The only Acer configuration that I could find for this, $2,200, $300 less, which is awesome.
$300 less.
But it's a 256 gig SSD option only.
So there goes my $300.
Yeah, so if you add a second M.2
and a hard drive.
If you can add a hard drive, again, I don't think they include the dongle. I mean, I hope they have that somewhere squirreled away on the laptop. You want a hard drive in this for cheap capacity. Then it's kind of a wash, right? Kind of a wash. You spend $100, $200 in your SSD and storage. It's kind of a wash.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why they sort of want the product segmentation. They don't want exactly Intel and GeForce, Nvidia versus Radeon, AMD, and Ryzen. They don't want that showdown. They just want people to say, this gets me this much, this one gets me this much. I gotta say, for me, if I'm a primary gamer, this one, if I also primary 3D renderer, also do lots of gaming, Ryzen 7, good choice. They're both good choices. But definitely this has the advantage, even though it's $300 more because of that storage configuration. It's a little wacky. So.
Okay, cool.
And I do want to point out, I don't know if we already said it, I do applaud Acer for doing both. It's very hard to find.
Yeah.
Laptop companies are doing both AMD and Intel and GeForce in the same product. So that is a good thing.
Do you think more people are going to start doing that?
I think it's a good home for this. This is not a platform you care about battery life. You don't care about power consumption that much.
Size, fans.
I could see somebody else, other vendors going, hey, we're going to use Ryzen 7, we're going to use Vega 56 in them. So it's very plausible. It would make a lot of sense. Again, people like small, sexy laptops like this HP Spectre X360.
Yeah.
That's kind of where all the action is, but for a gaming laptop, not bad. They got a good offering. Definitely, though, I gotta say there's a small edge to Core i9. Probably less edge to the 1070. Yeah. I could almost see the Intel saying, hey, or Acer going, we're gonna use a Core i9 with a Vega 56. Might not be a bad choice. You probably would not really care that much.
And probably win all the benchmarks.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, actually. If you put the Vega 56 in there, it could actually have a decent boost over 1070 with a Core i9. So I do think Ryzen
1080 then.
2700, the clocks are a little low to go up against the Core i9. Might be a little better against the Core i7. So, you know, but still, both great choices. Slight edge to this one for gaming.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, talk to you later.